Hello everyone, welcome. I'm Jim Tolles, I'm a spiritual teacher, and today I was going to talk to you about duality and oneness, non-duality and non-duality, oneness and separation, whatever we really feel like calling it. Just that sense that there is this space where everything is united, everything is one. And there's also the reality we live in where we're separate from each other. We have our own feelings, our own experiences that are distinct and unique from one another. As people are logging on, feel free to share what country or what state or region you're part of. It's always fun to see where people are around the world. If anyone is new to me, as I said, my name is Jim Tolles. I'm a spiritual teacher. I blog regularly at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. Welcome to Damien from LA. Glad to have you. And I do these YouTube chats usually every other week. I've changed things slightly in recent days where I'm going to ask for donations before I do these talks. So this talk is being brought to you by the donations of several people. And thanks to any of you who have donated and are listening. And my initial request to people in my newsletter and elsewhere, we also got another talk covered for 2 weeks from today. I'll be talking about awakening, food, and common sense, because I feel like we've lost a lot of common sense when it comes to how we're looking at food, and all sorts of interesting spiritual ideas have really gotten wrapped up in the whole thing. So hopefully I can bring a little bit of common sense and reality back to that. And if anyone would like to donate, there's a donate link down below, and that will go for the talk after that. And we still need about $50 more, and then that talk will be funded. And I'm doing it every $150 amount of donations, I'll do another talk. And I'm doing it that way because then anybody who just wants to come can still come. I'm supported, and so you're benefiting from the support that others give to me. Kind of paying it forward and redistributing wealth by choice rather than being forced into it, right? Today's talk is about how does oneness and duality coexist together, and I think it's important to just start with understanding that these are important concepts to a point, to understand how they are or what they are and what they mean to us. As we understand both, it just clarifies how we live in the world and how to live from a space of truth. When people are too lost in their unconsciousness and in their own separation, their own duality, it's easy to become very egoic because you don't feel or believe that you're connected to anything else. You're only out for yourself. We also don't generally feel particularly supported there. And we live in a world that is really focused on individuality, which is very much focused on separation. What can I get from me? And even people who attempt to help others are still kind of caught up in the whole separation, a sense of doing what's right based off of their own ideas of what is right, rather than coming in contact with the truth. When we come in contact with the truth, that's a very different way of moving and acting. We also often confuse human ideas around right and wrong with truth. The whole thing, the whole mess of separation can be quite confusing. And it can lead to a lot of control. And I see that in a lot of different spiritual systems where you start to get in trying to balance masculine and feminine, or trying to do this with this type of energy, or it gets so confusing trying to hold all these pieces together and to make them make sense if we don't understand the truth. And a lot of spiritual traditions pretend to know the truth. It's just we just balance this out here, and we do this over here, and it's just this constant control. And I think that's what makes only understanding duality, only understanding things as being separate and different pieces we have to move and control, problematic. And I'm not going to speak to any particular school of thought or anything like that. I'm not a philosopher. I'm speaking from the space of realization. That's a different thing. Duality can get very strange on the other hand, or a oneness and non-duality, I mean. Because a lot of people are going to come to it conceptually. Because obviously physically this body of mine is not really visibly one with everything. And I'm still feeling and thinking within my own sphere. So people come to it, to non-duality, and they're like, they like the concept. It's like, okay, we're all one. And when we only understand something conceptually, we don't really understand it, do we? It's like if somebody conceptually teaches you how to dance. Do you know how to dance? No, you do not. You conceptually know how to, you can talk about the steps, and left hand there and right foot there. And, that's kind of how a lot of people, a lot of spiritual seekers end up stuck in non-dual traditions. And there's a way that sometimes when they're coming conceptually to that sort of school of thought, unless they have a really good teacher to help them, then it's just about like negating separation. And I'm not saying that that's what any of those schools or traditions are teaching, but I'm saying this is a common problem with spiritual seekers. They start to say, well, the body doesn't really exist. Or all of this doesn't really exist. But they don't even really understand what that means. What do you mean that it doesn't really exist? We're still functioning in this world. We're still interacting with each other. Are we going to jump so far in our logic to say that we should somehow ignore it? There's lots of confusions around transcendence. This is what happens when only the mind understands something. And there's even worse ways where people try and kind of manipulate some of these spiritual truths to serve them in different ways. So if nothing really matters, then the ego says, well, I get to do whatever I want. Doesn't matter what I do. I can do anything. We're all one and it's all an illusion anyway, so to everybody else. The ego loves to do this. It's always waiting to find a way to self-validate. It's a lot more uncomfortable to turn our attention inwards and to really get a laser focus on what's happening in that level of duality. Because the ego is still a dualistic thing. It's part of separation. When we let go of the ego, deeper things start to be seen within us. And certainly deeper experiences start to be felt. And some of you listening tonight or listening to this recording later on may have had those experiences where suddenly you do feel connected to others or you do feel one. If you're a highly sensitive person, you may already feel some of that oneness, but feeling oneness when you're highly sensitive often exposes you to the fact that a lot of people are not happy. There's often a lot of confusion around connection in the sense that we think it's always going to feel good. I don't think people usually talk about connection in the sense that, oh yeah, well, it just sucks to be connected to that. It's going to feel bad. No, it's connection. It just opens you up to whatever is. If people are happy around you, then you're going to be more connected in sensing their happiness. If they're unhappy, you're going to sense their unhappiness. The big point here is we really want to see separation and oneness as realities, not concepts. If I leave any point today, I think this is one of the most fundamental ones, that we have to come more in contact, or not even more in contact, but more aware of the reality of oneness. And as we come inwards, this is part of what's happening, is we're letting go of our attachments to our external focus on separation. And external focus includes our bodies. It's because our bodies are a part of this separate world and they feel good, they feel bad, and that's not necessarily an indicator of anything in terms of oneness. It's just the body doing body things. The body is always doing body things. There's always a little bit of a trap for people who feel like they've experienced oneness to hold on to the experience and the body sensations that came with it. I usually like to frame it as the body responds to realizing oneness. And usually that response tends to be pretty enjoyable. It's not always the case, but it often is, where there's this dissolving away of a sense of separation, a sense of an identity, and here you are. So much of the work I offer, this is part of what we're doing when we're working on issues or attachments. We're actively looking at these pieces of ourselves that we're attached to and learning to let go of them. And letting go of them, more space is revealed. It's not added to anyone. That's the beauty of oneness. Oneness is always here. Think of oneness and duality like water molecules. And we're so fixated on ice, and ice is like duality. Right? We look at these hard shapes and we're like, well, that's not the same as water, right, in the fluid state, or it's certainly not the same as water vapor, but it is. Like, conceptually, you all understand this. It's another thing to go down the path of dissolving the ice parts in ourselves to melt into that fluidity and to even evaporate further. Coming as close as we humanly can in our living bodies to a profound level of realization of oneness. Sometimes oneness is like stepping back from the story, stepping back from a painting you're staring really closely at. If we're staring very closely to a painting, we can't see many of the details. If we're really, really close, I mean, like your nose is like right at the picture. It's like all you can see is like this little part of the hand, and then you start to step back as we start to acknowledge these deeper states of awareness. And then you see a little bit more. You still see more of the separation around you, more of the ways you're attached to it. And then you step back further and you see even more. And at times there'll be that sense of wanting to come back to that closeness of your identity, right? Whenever we get really upset about something, we've come back to the closeness of the identity. We don't like something, we have an attachment or some sort of aversion to pain or an attachment to some sort of desire. Something comes up and we run right back and we're staring closely at this particular part of the painting. We lose perspective. We lose clarity. And what happens if we lose perspective and clarity about a situation when we don't interact with it particularly well? And this is where we're usually starting out on our spiritual paths. Lacking perspective and clarity, and that leads us to guessing a lot, or just trusting whatever random things people say. I always say, you don't have to trust anything I say, but you can investigate what I say. The more deeply you come in contact with a oneness within yourself, the more you can realize many of the things I'm talking about. This, to me, is the true spiritual path. The true spiritual path will merge in deeper levels of clarity and understanding oneness and duality for you because they're already merged. And this is what we mean when we say that duality is ultimately illusion. So going back to the water metaphor, the sense that there's a separate thing that's ice and a separate thing that's water, it's still the same stuff, right? It's all one in its water nature. I could say we're all one in our consciousness, that everything has consciousness within it, that it's all united. It's just all in different icy forms. The further you come back to oneness, you start to notice that it never really changes. It's always still. And we're coming into contact as much as we can as human beings within our own limitations of what we can touch. There's a real humility to that. An unconscious ego, lost in the mind, trying to grab onto concepts, may touch an experience or touch on an idea and be like, I get it all. No, we don't get it all. We're human beings. We're limited. It's okay to be limited. Stepping into oneness helps us to appreciate our limitations. In the same way that if I turn on a light in a darkened room, I can see some things, but I can't see others. But the light is on in the room, and this is what I'm pointing you towards in all of your work, is to encourage you to let go of attachments, to step away from the things that you're focused on and connected to, to drop it into awareness of the deeper connections, because that's like turning a light in the room on. When the light is off, we just guess all the time, right? We're like, I don't know, there's something over there. I heard something snuffling over there. It's probably a cat or something, right? We guess a lot. You turn on the light, you're like, oh, it's a raccoon. Now, this is what makes spiritual people very powerful when they've done this work and they've become very realized. They just say what they see. Other spiritual people who haven't done this work, they have to hold on to beliefs. Beliefs are like an anchor sinking them into the sea, and then they're frustrated that they're drowning, angry at the people who don't want to agree with their beliefs. Some people are violent towards other people that don't agree with their beliefs. But coming into this deeper closeness with oneness, or deeper realization, I have to keep coming back to it. It's a realization. You can't get closer to something you're already united with. We're just peeling away our attention from the separation that makes it seem like we're not in that closeness. As we do that, everything gets clearer. The light goes on. You can see places in your life where there are blind spots, and you can be humble and ask for help with the things you can't see. The things you do know about yourself and about others, you just say them. As some of my students come in contact with that level of reality, they can be surprised by the strength of their own truth when one of them realizes they don't want to have children. And that's it. That's just clear. It's just where they are. There's no arguing with mom and dad about it or society that, oh, I should have kids or I should not have kids. We can go the other way with that one, where somebody comes into that contact with themselves and in their dualistic nature, what feels most true to them in their human expression is that they want to have children. They want to have 5 children. They want to have 1. Like, these things really are just like seeing stuff in the room that's already there for a lot of people. We're not going to necessarily have answers to everything, because we don't necessarily need answers to everything. It's just usually the stuff that matters most to us at our deepest core. And when you've chopped out more and more of your ego beliefs and your ideas, what really matters is what's left. It doesn't tend to change. It doesn't really argue with you. Sometimes things that feel more important or more urgent, and it's not necessarily that happens a lot, but if something feels urgent, then that will kind of arise more quickly and say, oh, we need to do this. But it's still kind of an undemanding thing. Or rather, it doesn't demand as the ego demands, which is what we're used to. Stepping into realization of oneness clarifies duality, clarifies separation, clarifies human living. And then if you want to do stuff with balancing masculine and feminine energy, have at it, because now you're moving from a place of clarity. A lot of tools and ideas and concepts become so much easier to use and to know when to use it. When we haven't come into this connection, or the realization of the connection, as I said, the light's kind of off in the room and we're guessing, or it's dim and there's like little bits of light and candlelight here and there, and we don't really understand ourselves. We don't understand life. These two concepts seem paradoxical, and I always like to add that this is not a problem with reality. The concept that we are one and we are separate, that's not an issue with reality. It's an issue with our human logic. We have created logical frameworks to say something can't be two things in that way. But there's plenty of science, that runs up against interesting things where, like, they'll say, one thing can't be in two places simultaneously, and then somewhere in quantum physics, it can. Or at least that's the current understanding. I'm sure it'll change or evolve. So what's the problem? Well, it's not the particle's fault for being in two places at the same time. The problem is in our logic. Human logic should serve reality. It should not serve dogma or just the ego's general sense that believing in things will keep it safe. And that's a big part of where people get stuck. They get stuck in their beliefs because they think if they have a set of beliefs that somehow this will keep them safe. The more you step back into oneness, right, that space is always here for us, and it accepts us unconditionally through life and into death. But it also helps us to see how changing and ephemeral this human body is, this human life is. It shows us the extent of how much we suffer, how much other people suffer. And it gives us access to new levels of joy and kindness that our ego shuts us off from us. It's just showing us what's real. That's it. If you don't want to live in reality, don't seek out the spiritual path. If you do want to live in reality, keep going within, keep surrendering your attachments. As I said, the key point here is that there is no conflict between oneness and separation. They can and do coexist because that's reality. If our minds don't like wrapping themselves around it, that's the problem of the mind, not the problem of reality. And this is an ongoing theme of learning to accept reality over our limitations, over our ego desires. I wrote a blog not too long ago called Finding Out You're Wrong About Yourself, because that's a big part of a lot of those initial years of spiritual awakening. When somebody awakens, you start to see the truth. And a lot of times the truth shows that you were wrong about who you thought you were. Because we're not thoughts, we're people. But we get so committed to these ideas. The cult of individuality and identity is getting so strong in the Western world. Everybody has to be something and to have things and to achieve in certain ways. And all of this stuff is putting so much stress and pressure on people. And yet we get more and more committed to it. Just holding on for dear life, like this is going to save us. Like if we have enough ideas and we've done enough things and got enough awards, enough sex and enough money and all these things, like if we get enough, then somehow we're going to be safe. But that's not the truth of the matter. And then somebody has a spiritual opening that helps them to realize some things, or somebody has a spiritual awakening and starts to throw them out of this identity, throw them towards the space of oneness. And I start to realize they are not a lot of these things. People realize they don't like the lives they've even created for themselves, even though they may be successful. Some people get really successful by human standards, but they're failing miserably internally. Everybody else will come by and say, no, you're doing great. You've got this, you've got that, because that's how the ego thinks. It thinks in acquiring a lot of stuff. It thinks about acquiring, it thinks about protecting what it acquires, and it thinks about getting rid of things it doesn't want. So all this positive human feedback will be coming, even though there's misery inside, and then somebody awakens and they have to acknowledge the misery. And they have a choice. They can change and go towards reality, or they can hold on and suffer more, only now they're going to suffer even more knowingly. That it's really, really hard to start to forget how much pain we're in once someone turns the light on the room. I often call this going inside out. So we go within, towards that space of oneness, to let go of these different levels of identity, of separation. And as I said, it clarifies the outside. So you go within, as you know yourself and you know reality more, you see more clearly what's outside. It's easier to enact and interact with all of it. And this is where people start to kind of drop into new levels of flow through that duality. That when you know yourself and you start to understand the reality of things, it's easier to kind of pick a path and to move more gracefully through it. Does that mean life is always going to be easy? No. There's a connotation currently in English with flowing and ease. Well, a river that's going through 5 rapids is flowing, right? But that's pretty rough waters to be going through. The flow can be like that. Other times it's just this really calm, steady, flat, flowing river. And you can just kind of lie back in it, and it moves you. Duality has qualities, we talk about in terms of energy, that's duality. In terms of sort of soul preference is still in the world of duality. Oneness really has no preference on anything. That's the beauty of it. It's the most truest, profound kind of love because it's total acceptance. But it's such a fertile ground from which things arise out of us. So it doesn't do anything, doesn't force us to do anything, doesn't change, it's changeless, and yet it makes it so much easier to understand life and change itself. And this becomes such a powerful combination to move from that stillness, to take action into these spaces of life, so long as we're in it, because life really is a miracle. Everyone listening to this tonight and listening to the recording later on, you are a miracle. There's just infinite number of things had to happen to be alive. This is another sort of realization that comes out of oneness when you just step back from it all and you step back from the ego's specialness that somehow thinks it deserves to be here and things should be fair and all the different things. But just you step back and realistically, you look at it and you're like, holy moly, this is a miracle. This microphone in front of me is a miracle. This computer in front of me is a miracle. This YouTube channel is a miracle. I mean, there's so many different pieces that had to happen for any of this to be possible. It's a miracle we didn't have some asteroid blast human beings off the planet 50,000 years ago or something. These types of realizations naturally engender humility. They naturally engender deeper levels of compassion when we see just how short our existence is. I mean, all these things, they don't frighten us as we let go of attachments. The ego is frightened by the shortness of life and pain and all that sort of stuff because it doesn't like it. And because it doesn't like it, it doesn't want to accept it. But pain and death are part of life. When we come into oneness, we see this reality about our human selves and we embrace it. Say, yeah, this human life thing is a short-lived thing. Trying to keep it around forever is going to be a failure. We have to let that go and live in the moment. Listen to ourselves and what feels true to our spirits, our hearts. And go from there. On this note, I think this is a good place to pause. And if anyone has any questions, you can log into YouTube if you aren't already, and you can type in the chat pod. Please keep the conversation directed to me. It's a small space. I want to make sure I don't miss anybody's questions. And I'll reply as I'm intuitively guided, because that's part of that quality of coming from oneness, that there's intuitiveness that arises out of it as well, in terms of what feels true to say, what I should offer, what I should not offer, what somebody needs to figure out for themselves. So there's really this amazing organic nature that comes out of deeper realizations of oneness and letting go of attachments. And that organic nature lives in duality and separation, how we interact, as I've been mentioning. Also, if you just joined us, I'm Jim Tolles, I'm a spiritual teacher. I'll be doing another talk in 2 weeks at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. I'll be talking about awakening food and common sense. And thanks to everyone who's donated for this and for the next talk. If you'd like to donate, there's a donation link down below in the comments. And you can just type in a little note after you've made the donation that this is for the online talks. Thanks, everybody, for that. Those who've donated. And thanks, everybody who's listening. What questions do people have tonight? And I can think of one question where, once again, this goes back to what I was mentioning earlier. If you're just joining me, I was talking about the conceptualization part. we can't think of oneness and separation as concepts, the realities. If we think of oneness as a concept, and as I also mentioned, it's easy to want to do that because it's not readily apparent to our eyes that everything is consciousness. It's like I see lamps in front of me, I see a plant, right? It's like I'm not physically part of the plant. So sometimes people want to jump to the concepts and just hold on to that and say, oh, okay, so I've heard from the spiritual teacher people that, we're all one, so I'll believe that. And then it becomes a concept. And we don't really understand it in the same way as I mentioned earlier that if you're dancing, right, you have to physically do it. You have to come to a realized state, an embodied state with that, not just a conceptual one. But the point I'm making here is that when people only conceptually understand it, then they can negate a lot of different things that are difficult and are not a lot of fun to do, like letting go of deep ego attachments, deep attachments to our bodies. The fear of death and the fear of pain, those are pretty powerful things, and they're built into our bodies to keep us alive, so that if something feels threatening or if we feel pain, we take action. Well, we've evolved past the point where we really need to be told by a lot of those systems to be afraid of a lot of different things. But they're still here. And they're going to define things unless we really learn how to let go of attachments. But since it's difficult, it's really, really tempting for a lot of people to just say, oh no, we're all one. Since I can't get any closer to oneness, like, why do the work? It's hard work. Staying in a space of awareness when your body is upset about something, say you're just sick. And a part of you is like, I don't want to be sick. So you keep coming back to awareness to try and let go of that attachment, that aversion to being sick, because you are, and that's your reality. If anyone's just joining, feel free to ask a question talking about oneness and duality. And I really am speaking experientially, as I mentioned earlier. I'm not speaking as a philosopher. I'm not interested in understanding all those systems. I'm interested in reality. And that's what I point all of you towards, is going towards that reality within you. You don't have to go anywhere to find oneness. It's already there. I always think that's good news, right? You don't have to buy a plane ticket to go anyplace special. It's here now. The more you return to that space of awareness, and oneness, awareness, I'm using those synonymously. I want to emphasize that. So oneness, awareness, presence, consciousness, these spaces are just there. Whenever you notice a thought, you notice a feeling, notice a sensation, you're aware of it. Our tendency is to draw our focus onto the thought or the sensation or the feeling rather than to just stay aware of it and not give it any more life or energy to it. And that's one aspect of the spiritual work that we can do, of just staying with it. And the stronger that draw to be interested in a sensation or emotion or a thought, the more we have to learn how to just kind of relax out of it, to not feed into it, so that these attachments break down. As those break down, things get clearer. We do have to be careful about not making spiritual inner work an end goal in and of itself. A lot of people, they get so caught up in like meditation. They just keep meditating because they're told it's important and it will get them somewhere, but they don't really understand it. We don't have to be in meditation to be aware, to be present. In fact, meditation is just kind of like a training ground. It's a chance for things to be quiet enough around us so that we can notice the noise in our minds and notice how we're attached to it. As we get better there, then it's easier to do that in our daily waking life. It's easier to do it when we're really triggered. That's a powerful thing. Because at certain times, life is going to be challenging. We're going to be badly injured, or we're going to get sick, or somebody we care about is going to get sick. Certainly, there are people in our lives who are going to die. Can we come back to awareness? Do we have that resilience to not feed into our ideas and our old thoughts? If we've let go of stuff enough, then it's way easier to be in those difficult situations and to be kind, to be wise. When the ego is not shouting at you that you have to do this, run away from this, or this is bad, or how are we going to save this, or whatever the situation is, it's so easy to see things clearly and to engage with them from that space of wisdom and do whatever is usually the kindest thing. It's like I rarely ever noticed that in letting go of attachments and ego and all that sort of stuff, that people get unkind. And there's certainly surprising things we can do. And life is a messy place, so it's not like we're going to find hard rules about this is right, this is wrong. It's not like that as we drop into oneness and we see the truth. Life puts us in really nasty situations, but by and large, the overriding reality is people become kinder. People become more humble and more compassionate. They don't generally want to hurt another unless they have to defend themselves or defend their loved ones. These are just more of that organic stuff that seems to arise as we let go of attachments, as we allow ourselves to rest in oneness, that clarify how we want to live in separation and duality. As I said earlier, let me know if anyone has any questions. And I'll just emphasize again that oneness and duality are not in conflict. They're only in conflict in the mind. As you understand reality, and you focus on reality more than on any sort of ego illusions of yourself, you'll see this for yourself. So you don't have to believe me. It's great. You can find out for yourselves, and I encourage all of you to find out for yourselves. It's the beauty of this type of truth, is it's not hidden. It's right here. It's accessible to all of you. Anytime any spiritual person says that, there are all these secrets and, things that can't be said, and, there are some levels of knowing that we don't necessarily easily say. This isn't secretive. Being here now, right? If anything, it's hidden in plain sight, and it's only hidden because we like to focus on illusion. Even oneness becomes a stronger sense that you connect to deeper and deeper. And it does become an experience at times, and that's fine, but you don't even hang on to the experience, because any sort of experience that we call oneness, feeling like we're part of everything, that's still just like the tip of the iceberg of the union that we're all enmeshed with. I think I'll wait a couple more minutes, give everyone space. If you have any questions, or anything you'd like me to clarify before closing for tonight. As I already mentioned earlier, I do these talks usually every 2 weeks. The next one will be 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, 2 weeks from today. I alternate so that my friends overseas in Europe can come and join. These talks are for those of us in the US and also some of my friends over in Australia, New Zealand, the Pacific Rim. As I also mentioned earlier, I blog regularly at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. I do one-on-one Skype sessions. I have a newsletter. You can also subscribe to the blog to get updated when there's something new. Lots of good stuff. So it doesn't look like there's too many questions tonight. So I guess we'll just stop at this point. Thank you all very much for your time and attention. And as I said, if you want to help support more of these talks for me to continue, there's a donation link down below. Any donation amount is appreciated. And of course, if you're not in a financial position to donate, don't worry about it. You know, I'm supported by others who do think these are important, that I make them available. So just know that other people are helping to take care of you and to take care of me. So have a beautiful evening or morning, wherever you may be, and I hope to have you at the next talk. Bye, everyone.